Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Let us know if you can hear us and see us. Hello, I'm Piotr Bogucki. I'm UX designer at Codilime.
And I'm Jerzy Kaczmarski, a network engineer also at Codilime.
And welcome to our webinar called UX in Network Applications. Let me start by saying that Codilime has strong expertise in network and cloud-native solutions. Software-defined networks, network function virtualization, and multi-cloud strategies are everyday life. At first glance, it may seem that such solutions have nothing in common with UX design. When you think about designing user experience, fitness mobile apps or banking apps first jump to mind. But good UX design also plays an important role in creating efficient network solutions where large amounts of data must be visualized. That's why we would like to cover this topic in today's webinar. It'll be divided into 4 sections. First, Jerzy will talk about the network applications challenges. Then I will talk more about what UX is, the terminology behind it, and even if it's worth the effort from business perspective. We'll then go through the process of creating an application from scratch, and I will show a few examples of how we redesigned existing products. And after that, we'll have a quick Q&A session. All right, now let me hand it over to my colleague, Jerzy.
Thank you, Piotr. Let's start the webinar by taking a look at some of the challenges that need to be overcome in order to create a compelling network application. Because let's face it, creating an easy-to-use solution that is great to work with and ticks off all of the requirements of different kinds of users is not an easy task. This is even more true for specialized applications, including the ones dedicated for working with systems and devices that make up a computer network. There are many aspects that need to come together in order to make the user experience very positive. So let's quickly go through just a few of them. First and foremost, an easy to use and intuitive interface. It does not have to be fancy or full of animations, but it needs to be responsive, show just the right data, and allow for quick configuration changes. We're also looking for proper nomenclature used in computer networking, settings placement and grouping of configuration items that make sense in the context of a given networking protocol or functionality. As well as some details such as icons and color coding that not only looks nice, but is also informative to a network engineer. The configuration size and the amount of data processed by a networking solution are both often very high. And to be efficient in everyday's work, there needs to be a way to readily browse through the configured values, to search for specific objects, and to filter the logs and data tables with a lot of flexibility. So if it takes a long time to identify and locate the relevant data, then the user will not be very happy with such an application. Yet another example are the interface types which one can use to work with the networking device or system. So there are situations where GUI is a clear winner, such as configuring complicated security rules on a firewall. Yet there are cases where CLI will get you more speed and accuracy and would be the preferred approach. And sometimes, when there are hundreds of configuration changes to be made, the only sane and safe solution might be leveraging automation and the API access. So providing more than one user interface is often something to thoroughly consider. What is also worth pondering is how to avoid making the interface prone to mistakes in configuration, how to make it more user-friendly with showing hints, giving context help for available commands and object values, and how to make the maintenance of the solution straightforward in a way that does not require sysadmin or DevOps skills. So Obviously, these are just a few factors that constitute a good, positive user experience, but the list, of course, can be much longer, and it can actually differ for various kinds of networking devices and systems. So, is a good UX in networking applications really that hard to achieve? Well, judging by some of these solutions coming from major networking vendors, it certainly is not easy. So let's take a look at few examples that are based on actual products to show some of the pain points. First one is actually quite common, and granted, it is hard to get right for all the available functionalities. That said, there are, for example, systems where configuring a single networking protocol requires inputting settings in several different branches of configuration. And without a lot of experience or some sort of step-by-step guide opened in a browser tab, it may be troublesome to remember all the places where changes need to be made. Next example is from a little bit different category, but it certainly is a problem that highly impacts the user experience and should be addressed at the product design stage. So there are networking devices for which, for example, loading GUI pages or filling drop-down lists or accepting changes and similar common configuration steps can each take multiple seconds. Or for example, solutions for which applying and executing the candidate configuration changes can take several minutes to complete. So it's actually hard to overstate how frustrating this can be whenever a timely reaction or reconfiguration is needed in the computer network. Another example I wanted to mention are solutions which do not provide a way to compare different versions of configuration. Such a feature greatly helps with troubleshooting. It can simplify backup and restore procedures. It can actually be useful in common configuration tasks. And lack of configuration comparison, or at least parts of it, deprives a network admin of one of the more commonly used tools in his typical arsenal. And as a final example, it's actually a feature that only relatively recently got attention from many of the major networking vendors. So the problem is that a single mistake in a networking device configuration can lead to blocking all the network traffic flowing through it, sometimes along with losing access to the device itself. So having no mechanism to automatically revert such misconfiguration can lead to major downtime and to measurable losses.
All right, so the solutions for what Jerzy mentioned here could be side pane or separate models to retain the info, or even better, autocomplete of the inputs with proper interface flow. There's also a matter of proper research of the technology used for the product to better guide the choice on the back-end and front-end sides. This can allow for the app to run smoothly and quickly. That's also a very important subject of a solid user experience. Next solution could be a visual comparison of configurations, simply allowing for human-readable format export of it would solve the issue, right? And the last item on the list, simple restore points, just like on operating systems. They could prevent outages and save precious time. And just to answer your question on the chat, yes, you will be able to see the stream later on, Ray. All right, so now let's talk a bit more about the business aspects of UX and how the real numbers shape up. Because the UX design process is so complex, it is wise to first ask whether the investment in UX really pays off. And the answer in a nutshell is yes, and the numbers could do the talking. Researchers have found that in some cases, every dollar invested in UX resulted in return on investment of over 9,000%. And 88% of users are more likely to not come back to a website after a poor user experience. And 94% of all the first impressions are design related. So as we know, the first impressions are really important. More on the business side, the design related company acquisitions soar. Over 100 design related companies have been acquired since 2004. Now let's take a look at how companies that focus on design are doing better in numbers. On the right, you can see the two graphs showing the annual growth of revenues and returns to shareholders in percents. The gray area shows the industry benchmarks, while the green line or the turquoise line, some of you more versed in colors, represents the top quartile of McKinsey Design Index performance. And this index rates companies by how strong they are at design and how that links up with the financial performance of each company. And as you can clearly see, the growth in these tend to be as high as twice the industry average. And what happens when the UX is not part of the process? Well, in short, it could easily lead to the product being a complete disaster. User interfaces that are not well designed are prone to cause unnecessary waste of time for the users. Whether it's because they need to fix their errors, process is not streamlined or understood by the users, it's just not what they expect at the right time and place. It also risks information architecture being too complicated and illogical. The information architecture is often usually driven by the technology used in the backend or frontend rather than by the user experience. All of those issues arise after development is done and still need to be fixed. So they create additional costs to the owner of getting the development team back on it and change the interface, or even to a point of needing to redevelop the backend in worst case scenarios. And the final nail in the coffin is the fact that the users might just not want to use the application altogether, resorting to either a simple command line interface that they are used to or switch to the competitor's solution.
So I think we can all agree that there is a big difference between average user experience and good user experience, which often translates into future interest of a customer in given vendor's products. So it's not only about getting a job done, but also about making it efficient, straightforward, and not prone to making mistakes. So what may not be apparent at first glance is the fact that investing in UX research and prototyping can actually save money. So it is definitely worthwhile to consider it.
Let's take a look at the UX process in detail now. I'm gonna talk about how we create application from scratch. And also, I'll show a few examples of redesigning an existing product. Before we go deeper into the process, let's take a quick look at the terminology surrounding our work. Firstly, let's talk about the UX. So, because it's not just about the nice and tidy user interfaces, as one might think, the topic goes much deeper into understanding the user, his psychological inner workings whenever he's using the product, his needs, expectations, and perceptions. UX is more of a process in trying to learn what the user needs so that we can create a better product. The difference between user interface, UX, or user experience, and front end. So UX could obviously mean a user experience designer in short, but when we are talking about the development process, UX is about how the product works and how the end user interacts with it, taking into account even his thoughts and feelings. The user interface, on the other hand, dictates how the product looks aesthetically, and is more or less what the user sees when they use your app. The graphical representation of underlying logic, let's say. And front end is the development part of creation of the user interface. It is done by the front end engineers that need to work in cooperation with the UX designer. Research and UX testing. So user research, good intuition is always welcome, and all the more when it's backed by solid evidence, again by researching solutions available on the market. Keeping abreast of what your competitors are doing will help you find the right benchmark for your design and avoid reinventing the wheel. On the other hand, you will be able to quickly find drawbacks of competitors' solutions and focus on solving them. Thus, your product will stand out by providing features that competitors do not. And the last thing I want to mention right now is the difference between low-fee, high-fee designs and prototyping. Low-fee designs, sometimes called wireframes, are the basic layout of each screen or step in black and white. Sometimes done on pen and paper and later redone in design software such as Figma. We use it to quickly map all of the necessary items and informations on each step of the user journey. We then have a foundation to create high fidelity designs, which are more or less how the end result of the development will look like. The high-fee designs are then linked together in prototypes so that we can test the user flows through the application without the need to write a single line of code just yet. Now let me go through the UX process at Codilime. We can divide it into 4 big sections, and I'll show steps inside them on the next 4 slides. So in general, there is an initiation time with project kickoff, where we get to know the problem we're trying to solve and align with the client. Then the product design phase starts with wireframes, prototypes, and UI. The next phase ties in closely because we then work with developers to implement the interface. And lastly, testing allows us to gather feedback from the real product and further refine the UX. The first meet with client is very important. It sets the stage for the cooperation down the line. I've actually created an article on this topic that you can read on our blog. But in general, this is where we form the strategy and tactics for the project's success. We discuss and create a clear path forward in form of a project roadmap. That is a timeline of events and objectives to meet business needs. They are discussed and confirmed with all the project stakeholders. We then develop the user flows and personas. The user flow is a high-level overview of the things that the application needs to satisfy the hypothetical user, called a persona, and allow him to achieve a specific goal within the product. A lot of knowledge about the user flows can be gained directly from the customer by giving out questionnaires and doing interviews. The users will show how they currently handle specific duties and provide ideas for improvements.
And here I can also be this hypothetical user, but as an engineer specializing in computer networks, I will be able to give usually more technical feedback and even suggest the most fitting ideas implemented in other similar products.
And at the same time, map of functionalities starts to shape. We build a tree of options and variances within processes to allow for all the avenues the users might take. And again, networks engineer help could be invaluable.
Yeah, so here, for example, I can help in proper planning of functionalities and their interactions, as well as adjusting priorities, for example, on which mechanisms are a must-have for the feature to work properly, and which are optional and potentially could be added later. So having knowledge about networking protocols and actual use cases helps to avoid mistakes at these early stages of the design.
Yeah, and with this in mind, we then create specific tasks the users want to complete. For example, viewing specific information, maybe creation of an entry, editing or deleting it, and even if it's even allowed or not for a specific user with their privileges.
When splitting those user stories and flows to actual well-defined tasks, a network engineer could be a big asset to the product owner, explaining some of the more advanced technical aspects.
Yeah, and we then go to creating our first wireframes based on the tasks. As mentioned before, these are very simple sketches of the information architecture on specific screens that are part of one of the tasks. This is then used to the second step, the feedback sessions, and again, Jerzy's help is vital.
Yeah, so at this point, having the wireframe model already gives us the opportunity to get a feeling of how the flow of application feels. Is it intuitive? Is it easy to find and input data? Are there any steps that seem out of place or are difficult to understand? So I can verify if a given flow does gather all the required information. Are all the points and steps strictly necessary? And does the data grouping and presentation make sense from the point of view of a networking professional?
Yeah, and then we can take a step back and remodel the wireframes. There's no way we got them all right the first time. Sometimes fixes are simple stuff, like adding additional options that we didn't think of, or moving a specific component, be it a button, text information, icon, just to a different place, let's say. In rare but possible cases, we need to rethink the process and redo the wireframes with different approach. For example, because the technology that we're targeting for the front end or back end might not work right with our designs. And after the information architecture on wireframes is accepted, we go to the hi-fi designs and prototypes.
And at this stage, the network engineer can give an informed opinion about the final hi-fi design that includes color coding, icons, appearance and contents of interface hints and such. So again, it's about being intuitive, easy to follow, and understandable to the user.
Yeah, and the next step is implementation. And it's the time for review and rebuild of the design if it's necessary. Here's where we cooperate with the front end, but also the back end engineers, steer them in the right direction in terms of technologies and architectures used. Based on the information that we gathered in previous steps.
But one has to remember that the development team consists mostly of software developers. They may lack expert networking knowledge needed to fully understand all the functionalities that need to be implemented. And here quick access to explanations and advice from a person that is well versed in these technologies is a great asset to have. So it will minimize misinterpretation of goals of given feature and help streamline the development process in general.
Yeah, and at this point, the new versions of given flow or feature are delivered to the development team. We provide assets such as different styles of fonts, colors, components, necessary items to create a library, and consult them on behaviors of specific items on the UI.
Mm-hmm. And after step 4, again, a network engineer should step in and verify the solution from the point of view of proper behavior of networking protocols and mechanisms, which not every QA tester is familiar with. So this allows to properly validate if the implementation fully complies with the requirements.
Yeah, and then we move to the testing. And as mentioned, we need new participants to have a fresh look at the interface that they have never seen before. We run through the feedback sessions where we gather both quantitative data. So basically, these are numbers of errors or successes. And also qualitative data, so the subjective feedback from specific users. And in this repetitive feedback sessions, consultation with networking professional is beneficial in similar way as before.
Yeah, so we can give concrete technical guidance and serve with advice here as well.
Yeah, and then all the feedback is taken back, carefully reviewed. The findings also need to be consulted with the product owner to act upon them in an informed way. It rarely happens, but testing sometimes show new and interesting avenues that we can pursue in terms of user experience and flows. All right, now let's take a look at a few examples of issues that we had to tackle when redesigning existing network applications. So the first screen I'm showing here consists of tables, one of the most important elements of network system, where the constant and enormous flow of information has to be structured in the UI in order to optimize the user experience for the users, right? Which in most cases are simply put professional network engineers. On this screen, we are faced with an old style of user interface that needs to a total overhaul. Components are completely out of place. The rows are not easily distinguishable. Texts are truncated. The table does not even use the full height of the available space. So we've changed the tables to be as usable as they could be. We've added the functionalities to manage all the tables within the application. There is less effort needed for the user and faster reach to information. All the columns are resizable, removable. You can add columns and change their order. Also, such views are more useful when you can search for particular data. So we've refined with filters at the top. And this new information architecture was helped with modern user interface design. Now let's go to another example of our UX work. Here we can see a wizard with huge amounts of inputs. Looks like a tax return form. The process has its chronology broken and poorly designed information architecture, and it compounds the problem of poor usability of the screen. Users might not even want to go through this process when faced with such a task. And at this point, we decided to do this, give it a fresh look with simple steps to guide the user through the process. We've hid the non-essential stuff, and we made sure that the user has all the information he needs with hands-on pop-ups with hints. The process is shortened to only 4 steps, not to overwhelm the user, and I think we can all agree this looks much better. Lastly, let's talk about the specific component used extensively through the app, both on graphical user interface and on command line interface. So suggestions and autocomplete options. These allow the user to streamline their work, right? The lack of such hints and options simply makes it for dumb product and really bad experience of needing to remember all the details that can easily be solved by the application. Suggestions should be specific to the view and context with information from previous steps, for example, name of a device or its IP address, readily available and without the need to remember all of those items, right? These suggestions allow for quicker completion of a task, but also reduce the amount of errors, obviously. So the user can focus all of his attention on getting the job done. Yeah,
so hopefully this presentation managed to showcase that indeed designing good UX for networking applications does require some special considerations. So to reiterate on some of the points already mentioned, there is specialized terminology and particular set of protocols, knowledge and logic at work in computer networks. So working with broad and diverse data sets is common occurrence, which makes it imperative to make it swift and user-friendly. There are plentiful of user interface flows that need to be considered, and often the configuration flows actually mix with each other. As for example, a single object may be reused in settings of multiple features. So this in turn makes it important for the available user interfaces to be consistent. Let's not make users that know GUI relearn the configuration patterns when they try to use a CLI. And finally, due to the specificity and nature of computer networks and protocols, special considerations might be required for various other features, such as, for example, having the option to simply export the configuration in a human-readable format.
all right. That was a nice explanation. Thank you, Jerzy.
Thanks.
So to summarize, user experience is a hot topic when it comes to developing virtually any kind of digital product. Good UX design is key element to attract customers and maintain their loyalty. It's even more pronounced with network apps, where huge amounts of data and information need to be shown clearly and neatly. End users of network apps are professionals. They have complex and specific requirements that have to be met. And it's a real challenge to create a UX design that responds to those needs of network engineers, managers, and analysts. In the end, a digital product should be easy to use, useful, intuitive, basically to improve customer satisfaction. And this is all we wanted to cover today. Thank you very much for your attention. Now we can answer your question. I see that you've got some already. We'll wait a few minutes more if there are some more of you that ask question later on. But first up, Ray, the first question I already answered. Then Vrushali, how do we handle scales of 10,000 numbers of applications or objects in network environment? Any proven case studies? All right, let me think about it. Actually that's a really good question, because I'm actually working on a project where we have huge amounts of single elements within the network, let's say, application. There's lots of data, and we're actually showing counters for those huge, these huge numbers of objects. There is a real pain to choose the specific backend technology and front-end to meet those objectives. It's not easy, I can tell you that. We're still working on it, but there are ways. There are definitely ways to do it. Obviously, there are ways just bring in more money and pay for a lot more of performance in your on your backend, but it does not work in most severe cases. So. This is a real problem, and it needs to be solved on a project basis. So whatever the project is, then we need to figure out a way how to handle that. Hopefully that answers the question. The next one was from Ray again. How does this fit into an agile development model? So as you probably saw, the UX process is repetitive. So it goes in circles. We do it every single time. The steps are repeatable. So we go back and forth. These are the first maybe the first step is not repeatable, because the kickoff is not needed to be done again, right? We know the problem. We've created the general idea behind the product that we want to have. But later on, this is all iterative, and it fits really nicely into agile development. It's actually one of the principles of this process. And I can see the third question. Can you share any real-life example when proper user research made a substantial difference in the final networking product? Okay. All right, so one of the clients, my colleague actually worked on this project. One of the clients came to us with an app already on the market. Can't go into details, but generally speaking, we went through the application with our test subjects, so meaning our colleagues at the Codilime and some of the users from the client. And we've made them to make set up a simple tunneling and firewall policies. It turned out to be a really hard thing to do, and actually most of the people didn't finish the job. They couldn't reach the end of the task. So that was a really showing and telling sign that we needed those tests to show it. So after the tests, we redesigned the app, and in short, after the testing and after the user feedback, the actual user tests show that we have 100% success rate. So we've changed the app completely in terms of this flow, let's say. Any other questions? I don't see any just yet. Maybe we can wait a few minutes. Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could just shortly go back to the first questions about the very high scales with tens of thousands of objects. From at least the user perspective, here the things that we've mentioned about grouping, about categorization, about filtering, about proper use of data tables, this is the exact situations where we need to have these features, because otherwise with this number of different configuration items or logs or settings, we would be completely lost without an ability to be able to somehow limit the scope and only show us the stuff that we are interested in. So definitely this is something that is that needs research and consideration.
Yeah, all right. I don't see any more questions. I don't know. I guess we can finish this. If you have any more questions on this topic, on any other topic regarding network apps and such, you can hit us at team@codylime.com or read anything on our blog at Codylime. Oh, I can see the question. Does a table always come with visual way versus having just the text? Of course, yes. So, actually, this is one of the topics that I've covered in my project that I'm working on right now. For example, you've got, let's say, severity of some stuff, right? You can say severity is low, medium, or high, but you can always tell it in visual way, right? So you can have like those dots whenever you have a rev limiter on your or rev match on your car. When you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 RPMs, you can obviously have that something like that with the severity or any other thing that can be numerical or value like that. So yeah, definitely there's a way to quickly and better show. Actually, the users tend to ingest this much more quickly, right? You don't have to waste time on looking through the text. Generally the visual data is much better ingested from the user perspective. So yes, and the tables are also there's a possibility to use those in tables, absolutely. And do you think customers interact with heavy visualization or referred tables? Right, so we can do both ways actually, because there are times that we need tables, and users are just so used to tables, right? You use them all the time. You use on Excels and stuff like that. We don't want the users to change their paradigm on how they use the product or how they go about their business, right? But absolutely, if we have the ability to visualize something, then this is the best way to go with it, I think. As I've mentioned before from the previous question, visualizing data is much better than having this text or number in a cell. Yeah. So, maybe just to answer maybe your question, it's not a matter of thinking whether they use this or that. We give them options, but definitely visualization is much easier and much better and much quicker way to do it. All right, so I guess that's it. Thank you very much. You can check out our website at codylime.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I guess see you on our next webinar. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.